Coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Greetings. My name is John David Wells. On a big day, it's a big news day. We've got some economic news that we're going to start with here in just a couple of seconds. So stand by for that. What is the Wells Report? You've probably never heard of us before, but that's okay because you'll hear about us soon. We bring you the news. We bring you analysis for fact. After analysis for fact and we report the news, then I make commentary, and then we debate the commentary. So it's news. It is news, analysis, commentary, and debate. It is the Wells Report, and thanks very much for being with us. We have just gotten some interesting economic news. The Fed, trying to slow down inflation, the Fed has raised the federal funds rate by 75 basis points, or 3/4 of a point, to match the 3/4 of a point last month. So in the last 2 months, they have raised the Fed funds rate by 1.5 points. That's kind of a big deal. It does have stark repercussions throughout the entire economy. It's one of those waves that I talk about going through the economy. But I have to point out that I am not a financial genius, but I happen to know one. And so what I do know is what I don't know. So I turn things over to Frank Kushner. He's the CEO of Ensemble Financial, and he joins us. He also has a show himself. That is Money in the Bank with Frank. Frank Kushner, thanks very much for joining us on the telephone here on the Wells Report.
Hey, JD, good to talk to you. I just want to throw out a little disclaimer. I'm also affiliated with Titleist Asset Management as a director. None of my comments or anything I say here is Ensemble Financial or Titleist Asset Management. This is all educational. It's a lie, folks. It's a lie.
It is not. It is not a lie. He's telling the absolute truth. Look, this guy.
Oh, I get a kick out of it. I may or may not actually discuss individual securities that we own as a firm and or as a money manager. But
yes.
That being said, yeah, we have a ton of information that has been coming out. The Fed, not too very long ago today, raised the rates another 75 basis points and mentioned that they will indeed potentially do another large rate hike in September, but it will all be data dependent. Now, as you mentioned, they did say they were going to raise by another 75 basis points, or 0.75%, which, when you're looking at the amount of money out there in M2, that's a substantial amount of interest. So yes, why is the market going up? You may ask. Why? You're looking at higher interest rates, higher taxes, less supply, stable if not more demand, problems with housing, China, Ukraine. Gosh, I could go on for quite a while. David, why is the market up today? Why? I
don't know. That's why I was going to ask you. Why is the market up today?
More buyers than sellers. No, I jest. It's actually because things are because the Fed mentioned that they may actually not raise substantially moving forward. Literally, there was a question by Steve Leisman posed to our Fed president, and they asked Powell specifically, are we in a recession? Do you think we're going to be in a recession? And he completely dodged it, not once but twice. He does not want to get us caught up in that. Probably kind of a good reason. He doesn't want people to kind of have negative mindset and then maybe stop spending. But the difficulty here, and the real challenge I believe that we're going to have, one of the real big problems is that we have so much money still out there, so much liquid money out there chasing fewer goods. It's not something that interest rates on their own are going to address. You can't just say, hey, I'm going to raise interest rates and China's going to start producing chips for us, and Taiwan is going to start delivering chips for us, and they're just going to magically appear. There is no horn of plenty, David. John David, there is no horn of plenty. It doesn't just materialize. It has to be made, it has to be packed, it has to be shipped, it has to be received, and then it has to be trucked, and then it has to be delivered, and then it gets into our dirty little hands with all our money. All the money in the world is not going to get me a Christmas tree this year. Right now, I'm not going to find one on the street corner, am I?
No, but fortunately they come from Oregon mostly, so you really don't have to worry about that too much. But let's talk a little bit about what this actually means. So the Fed funds rate, what is it to begin with?
Well, look, okay, so I mean, gosh, that would probably be a little bit of overkill. It's like trying to use a sledgehammer to hang a picture. Why don't we say that interest rates? The easiest way you could say is as interest rates go up, the cost of borrowing goes up tremendously, right? So if you could afford a $400,000 house and I'm making up numbers here, if you could afford a $400,000 house with a stable, say, $1,400 a month interest rate, that would be your payment when it was at 3%. Now you're looking closer to $2,400 a month. So if you have less money in your pocket to actually spend on stuff, that is how the Fed gets you to stop buying stuff. The problem is we still all need the stuff. We need to eat, right? You've heard in the past couple of days that Walmart, got hammered with earnings. Target got hammered with earnings. And you're hearing all sorts of people saying that, well, they had the wrong stuff, right? They were stocking the wrong stuff. The stuff that they were stocking was not the stuff people were buying. That's because people prioritize what they're going to buy when times are tough. Like today, I believe AT&T came out, it may have been last night, but came out and said that people are not paying their bills on time for their cell phones. Who would have ever thought people would actually pay their cell phone bills late? Well, if your choice is between filling up your tank of gas and paying your bill on time for your cell phone, which one are you going to do?
Exactly. We're speaking with Frank Kushner. He is a director with Titleist Asset Management, also the CEO of Ensemble Financial, joining us on the Wells Report. So the price of borrowing money goes up, and what ends up happening is that people have less money because suddenly they have to pay more on their credit cards. They have to pay more on if they have an adjustable rate mortgage or something along that line, their payments go up. So doesn't that sort of kind of throw us into the idea of slowing down the economy to bring down inflation?
Yeah. And if it was something solely done by the government having actually had easy money for way too long by itself, then that's something that maybe we could address better. But the problem that we're having right now is not money supply. It wasn't created by the lack of cash out there. It's literally created by the lack of materials and finished goods.
Okay. All right. So let's talk a little bit about what this means for us. What does it mean for the person walking around on the street? What does it mean when the Fed funds rate goes up 75 basis points?
Well, historically in the past, if you see an inversion in the yield curve, and we're supposed, if you think of it in the simplest of terms, if you loan money, which is fixed income, right, a bond, if you loan money to the government, that is buying a treasury. If you buy a 2-year treasury, you should probably get a lower interest rate if you're only loaning it to them for a year. Now, if you're going to loan it to them for 10 years, then the interest rate that you get should be higher, because if I'm going to take the risk of loaning you money for 10 years, I'm going to charge you more in interest to do that traditionally. What's happened lately is an inversion in the yield curve, which is to say that if you actually loan the government money for 2 years, you get a higher return than if you loan them money for 10 years. It's unheard of. And what that shows historically is that within 12 to 18 months, you're in a recession. And when people ask, what is a recession? What is a depression? Well, simply a recession is when your buddy loses his job, and a depression is when you lose your job. So people are really worried about losing their job and not being able to pay for their things, and hoping that their nest egg and the money that they've saved will hold them over until they find a new job. The problem there is that we've seen so much asset price destruction that the amount of money that they had saved up is now down 20 to 60% for bad investments or chasing the bubble or just not paying attention, not listening to Money in the Bank with Frank.
Yeah,
and
that's a
or the Wells
mistake.
Report when we were on
Yep.
the radio.
Back in the olden times.
In which case, if you've got less money to make it through this recession, whatever may be coming, we may be in a little trouble.
Well, what I want to find out is this. Okay, so we put $1.9 trillion into the economy, and that created a whole bunch of fuel for the economy to expand, and it did. And now we're in a situation where we also made a policy decision to stop harvesting America's own natural gas, petroleum, and coal. And as a matter of fact, a war on coal by the Biden administration, which pushed fuel prices through the roof. We're still just about paying twice as much as we did before President Biden took office. So we're clearly in a situation where everything is touched by fuel cost, everything, which means prices will continue to go up and inflation will continue to get worse. And I have said, just kind of a wild guess here, but I can't see that we can't be in a recession at some point. I mean, and I also can't see that we're not going to have inflation rates over 10%. What are your thoughts?
As for the numbers, I have no idea what they'll ultimately end up at. I love to think of math as something that you can't fake, right? It's either 0 or 1, right? I don't know. But unfortunately, you can. You can, because you can choose what you actually want to call, part of that basket. You've got, and I'm not going to get into the difference between PCE and core CPI, but you choose what measurements that you want in order to figure out whether or not we're in a recession or not. The one thing I don't see is a lot of people out of work yet. I do see prices going through the roof, and input costs are going up because wage inflation is getting kind of tough. And I really hope that we all keep our jobs and keep making the same amount of money. And I would love for price stability in the dollar to happen miraculously, but I just don't see it. I see inflation staying elevated, which is going to affect input costs, which is going to cause inflation more in prices and or wages, because you need people to make things and do stuff,
right?
Which is going to cost more to companies, which are then going to lay off staff to cut costs.
He is Frank Kushner.
He
is Frank Kushner. He has Money in the Bank with Frank. We're going to talk more about that. It's a podcast that you can find. He is a director with Titleist Asset Management. Nothing he's saying has anything to do with the dealings he does with Titleist Asset Management or as the CEO of Ensemble Financial. Anything that he does in that particular company, this is just informational. If you want to know more, call 212-489-1800. That's 212-489-1800. So when is a recession a recession? We'll ask Frank next. This is the Wells Report. You are listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Joining us is Frank Kushner from Titleist Asset Management. He's a director there, also the CEO of Ensemble Financial, and he has a podcast of his very own. It's called Money in the Bank with Frank, and we'll be talking more about that in just a couple of moments. Historically, when gross domestic product, GDP, has negative growth for two is it quarters or is it months?
Yeah,
it's quarters.
2 consecutive quarters of
Yeah.
declining GDP.
That is normally the sign of a recession that has been walked back by the Biden administration, who has tried to redefine what a recession is. I can't see that we can escape one, but I've got a guy who knows all there is to know about them, so let's find out a little bit more about it. So, what are the typical rules of thumb to find out whether or not you're in a recession? And is there actually a barrier you go through, or you just sort of slip into it?
Are you familiar with Zeno's paradox?
No.
So it just briefly, because I don't want to get too sidetracked on this, making comparisons, but it says that basically if I throw a ball to you, it's never going to get to you because it has to go halfway first, and then it's got to go halfway again, and keep going halfway, and it'll never really get to you. And then you disprove it by catching the ball. That's effectively, like, that's how ridiculous I feel it is about the technical definition of a recession. Like, who cares? Like, you and me, do we really care? Who cares that it's 2 quarters of declining GDP? What we really care about is, like, am I going to eat today?
Right.
Am I going to make it to, like, how much money am I burning driving back and forth to work? How much food is, like, not getting on my kids' tables? I've gone out to eat lately with my wife to just just regular big box kind of restaurants, and the amount of money that I'm spending is just killing me. A recession, effectively, in a recession, the economy struggles, people lose work, companies make fewer sales, and the country's overall economic output declines. I think we could safely say that, with the exception of people losing work, and some are, but overall, people don't feel good. People aren't happy.
Well, consumer confidence.
We can say that we're kind of in a recession. I don't know that I've seen anything on social media where people aren't talking about inflation, where people aren't talking about how much things cost, and how much people are saying that if I hadn't bought this thing 2 to 3 years ago, I wouldn't be going, and or telling their friends that so that they don't make their friends feel like, why am I not why don't I have that money to spend either? So I think it's pretty easy to say that we are at least mentally in a recession.
All right.
So you could look at the most popular, the 2 consecutive quarters of declining GDP, or you could just say that people are worried. People are not as positive in where we're headed than they used to be. So I would say that, if you feel crummy, you probably are crummy. Right?
Well, let's talk about Money in the Bank with Frank. Where can people find it?
That is a great question, JD.
I'm so glad I asked it.
That is, we are filming. We're doing a new podcast. We've transitioned, much like yourself, from traditional broadcast to the podcast world. And while I have taped a few, they are being played around with in post-production, and we're trying to figure the best way to do it. But you'll be able to find me on all of them as well, SoundCloud, Spotify, and Apple. You'll find it on there. Just look me up eventually under. You can find me now on the old stuff for Money in the Bank with Frank.
All right, I will do it. So Money in the Bank with Frank Kushner, thanks very much for joining us. It's always good to talk to you, man. I miss you, amigo. 212-489-1800 is how you get in touch with Frank Kushner of Titleist Asset Management. This guy is a real pro. Whenever I have money questions, I go to one guy, Frank Kushner. 212-489-1800. So, listen to Frank. What does Frank say? Frank says that if you feel like you're in a recession because you're not spending the money you used to spend, maybe it's because you're in a recession. And so that's something that I think we're all going to have to think that over and decide for ourselves. You're listening to the Wells Report. Back with more coming up in just a couple of moments. Thanks very much for being with us today on this Wednesday. This is the Wells Report. Thanks very much for being a part of our show. You can do that a couple of different ways. You can call us at 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172, or you can join us via chat, which is always kind of cool. Want to say hi to Mike Renwee. Also want to say hi to Jessica Hamilton Kennedy. Von Field has joined us. Lois Floyd. And Hoy Guzman is back. There you go. She's spending, she points out that she's spending more money but enjoying it less. Yeah. Eating out is not worth the money anymore. Well, I'm fortunate because Susan, my wife, is an amazing cook. She's probably the best chef in America not doing it for a living. And so she can make, I mean, some of the greatest meals I've ever had in my life is when Susan goes over to the refrigerator and just starts grabbing stuff that's left over and combining them into a new meal. So I'm fortunate. But we are spending less money here in the Wells household. We're spending less money. We're doing fewer things. We are, we normally went out for a Taco Tuesday at Fuzzy's, and we don't do that anymore. And we normally would spend, some time at one of our favorite restaurants, what have you, during the weekend. We don't do that anymore. I don't drive as much as I used to. I sort of conserve my gas for when I have to go do something, whether it's radio related or whether it's broadcast related or whether it's Texas State Guard related. I sort of have to keep my powder dry so that I can make sure that I don't end up, because, we're dropping $100 for a tank of gas. And it's like that money doesn't come easy. And so when you talk about, okay, are you in a recession or not? Yeah, I'm in a recession. And I expect that there are a lot of people that feel that way too. Now, there are obviously political ramifications for the R word, recession. President Biden insists there is no recession, and he is working his way through the economy like everybody else. Jim Tankersley, reporting for the New York Times, said this after a virtual meeting with tech manufacturing executives on Monday. President Biden was asked about his latest economic headache. How worried should Americans be the country might be in a recession? He replied, "We're not going to be in a recession." I don't know how you can stop that, sir. I have no idea. With fuel prices the way they are, with costs going through the roof, I cannot imagine how we have not. And it's not like a barrier you go through. This was something I was talking with Frank about. This is not like you break a barrier and poof, you're in a recession. That's not the way it works. What the way it works is that the country sort of settles into a recession, and you sort of have to read those tea leaves through the rearview mirror. But there are rules of thumb. One of those rules of thumb: 2 decreases, 2 negative quarters of gross domestic product, and chances are you're in recessionary times. So the president says, well, we're just not going to be in a recession. Okay, Mr. President. The president's aides spent much of the past several days making that case publicly ahead of critical economic data set for release tomorrow. That, by the way, would be the next assessment of gross domestic product, or GDP. That could, at least informally, signal the start of a recession by a common shorthand definition, which has been changed and has been morphed by the Biden administration. Randy points out, yeah, well, the Biden administration also points out that the border is secure as well. Yeah, you're catching on. You are catching on, Randy. There's no doubt about it. In the latest chapter in a challenge that Mr. Biden has faced since taking office, trying to largely unsuccessfully persuade Americans the economic recovery is stronger than people perceive. After more than a year of attempting to soothe consumer anxieties over soaring inflation, the Biden administration has segued into a sustained public campaign to extinguish fears the nation economy has dipped back into recession. Officials have leaned heavily on the strength of the job market and referred frequently to the criteria used by the Economic Research Committee that formally declares when recessions start and end. The campaign has been complicated by the Federal Reserve, which has tried to slow the economy in seeking to wrestle inflation under control. Again, today, the Fed made a supersized interest rate increase, 0.75 of a percentage point, likely lifting rates by 0.75 of a percentage point and raising the odds of a policy-induced downturn later this year. How do you get rid of inflation? Well, you slow the economy down. What is a recession? Well, that's what happens when the economy slows down. So once again, I was talking about this yesterday on the Wells Report. I was talking about this, and the way this works is that these are all self-inflicted moves. These are all self-inflicted problems. What happened is when you throw all that money into the economy, $1.9 trillion, a bunch of us got a piece of that. You throw all that money in there, and that raises prices because there are more dollars chasing the same number of goods, and that starts the price increase. Then what you do, and what the Biden administration did, was declare a war on coal, natural gas, oil, petroleum, and coal. And I said them all. Anyway, he declared that these fossil fuels, which are not fossil fuels, the process that made fossil fuels is ongoing. These oil fields are replenishing themselves, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to be using petroleum and coal and natural gas for centuries. I mean, this is just craziness. And so he decided that we were going to get away from that in favor of Chinese-made solar cells. Oh, okay. Well, the thing about it is none of that infrastructure exists yet. And so the price of fuel is going through the roof. Everything moves in the United States by burning fuel, not by running on batteries. I mean, I live near a couple of railroad yards around here, and I still haven't seen an electric locomotive. I know they're out there, but they have wires overhead. They have wires overhead that actually make them function. None of those are out there. There's no infrastructure in place for this green new delirium. And so what we have a president trying to chase that to appease the left in the United States, which somehow has power that it is not justified and does not know what to do with, except create a totalitarian rule for Americans. So now we have all of this, and that, since everything moves because we burn fuel, well, the prices continue to skyrocket, and that's inflation. These are all self-inflicted moves. And so what's happening is the Fed is doing its absolute dead level best to find a way to slow the economy down, thus heaping on extra weight for a recession. That, by the way, was from the New York Times. This from Fox News. Some liberal media outlets are beginning to fall in line with the Biden administration's spin on redefining what a recession is ahead of a release of potentially devastating economic stats. I think that's a little overstatement, by the way. Economic data to be revealed tomorrow may show 2 consecutive quarters of negative gross domestic product, which has long been the measure that determines whether or not the U.S. is in a recession. Certainly, if President Trump was in office, a downturn of 2 quarters in GDP would absolutely be reported as a recession. But now we're hedging. Now we're warping, we're twisting, we're spinning, and so on and so on. There's a major push by the White House to preemptively declare that even if the U.S. economy has shrunk over 2 consecutive quarters, it doesn't necessarily mean the economy is in a recession. Look, if you've changed the way you live your life based on the fact that you have to spend twice as much for fuel, you're in a recession. That's just all there is to it. I mean, if you have cut down on some of the goodies, if you haven't splurged as often, if you haven't gone out to dinner as often, you're in a recession. And I don't know why. To me, these are things that are easily fixed. The only problem with it is that I don't see things through a political lens. President Biden must see things through a political lens. I mean, whoever is running the Biden administration for sure sees things through a political lens. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to get us through this so-called transition into some form of an economy that doesn't exist yet, with disastrous results. And they have their politics all tied up in it. And what they're going to have to do to be able to change all this is change their politics. Will they? I don't know. It depends on whether or not they take a drubbing in the 2022 election coming up in 90-some days. If they take a drubbing, and I suspect that they will, even though there's a whole bunch of stuff out there saying, now, wait a minute, don't count your chickens before they're hatched here. No, don't really. The only thing that we can do for the sake of this nation is turn away from Democrat policies. That's all we can do. We simply must. And so, yeah, that's correct. Langston just chipped in here. He said, you don't see things through a political lens. No, I don't. No, I see things through a regular guy lens. Okay. If you look through a political lens and you say, okay, and politics is about advantage and opportunity. It's about advantage, trying to create advantages for your political buddies. So the Biden administration's political buddies are in green energy. And so what they're trying to do is morph us away from standard energy or natural energy to something that is more green in their view. So they think it's okay for us to create a huge expense for gasoline when there is no alternative. There is no alternative. You cannot go trade in your car for an electric one. You cannot pay the electric bill that you have right now. How are you going to add a car that sucks in electricity like water for chocolate every time you drive it? And so none of this infrastructure is in place. But through a political lens, well, that makes all the sense in the world. But then when you go back and look at it through the lens of reality, which is what we do, we say, oh, you guys move too fast on this. You moved too fast on this, and you made a huge mistake on this. So the price of fuel is through the roof because we are no longer energy independent. And so the price of fuel went up for everyone in the entire planet because the United States was contributing to the world market and depressing the prices. Well, this is the payback. And so once again, you are in a position where you live in a society driven by oil, and you're trying to get rid of it, and you're making it too expensive to use, and same with coal, and same with natural gas. And what you've got is a disastrous economic times. And so what you have to do is you have to reverse it. You have to open the Keystone Pipeline. You have to tell these leftist green people that they are not ready for prime time. And President Biden just doesn't have the guts to do that. He doesn't have the political opportunity, the political capital to do it. And so we're stuck with it. We are stuck with it until their policies become so amazingly painful. So that those policies become so amazingly painful that what ends up happening is that they have got to change. And I suspect that by losing control of the House and losing control of the Senate, they will change in some way, shape, or form, and things will get better if the American people actually act. And so once again, it comes right down to what you do in a voting booth, which is what we're trying to get done here. I'm not trying to evangelize for you to vote for Republicans. I am trying to evangelize for you to vote against Democrat policies that are screwing up the economy. So don't get me wrong. I point out that this is not a partisan broadcast. It's not a partisan broadcast. This isn't about politics. This is about a political party that is doing its best to pursue its agenda beyond reality. The reality is there is no green energy economy. There will not be a green energy economy for at least 20 years. We are not looking in the right places to have a green energy economy. In other words, we haven't done a thing with superconductors. We're not doing the things necessary to be able to put all this stuff in place. And so green energy is 20 years too soon. So what do? Well, you have to stick with standard energy. And what you have to do is you have to work to the benefit of the American people instead of working in spite of them. And that's where we are right now. But getting back to what I'm trying to tell you is, if the Republicans were doing this, if Republicans were the green energy party, I would be saying exactly the same things. I've been incredibly critical of the Republican Party. They work and convince us, the Democrats are bad, and we have to vote for Republicans all the way, just like they're doing right now. And then when they have the power, they don't do anything with it. I've said it often on the Wells Report. We have one party that operates in spite of the American people, and then the other political party ignores the American people. So yeah, I'm climbing the Democrat Party's case because they are screwing up the economy and our country. Okay, so, but that is not because I'm anti-Democrat. It's because I'm anti-chaos. It's because I'm anti-damaging America. All right, I'm just trying to make sure you understand where I'm coming from here. All right, so economic news, not so good. Recession, yeah, I think so. Is it going to get worse? Is inflation going to break double digits? Probably. Is it going to last a while? Yeah, it's going to last a while. So what do? Well, we batten down the hatches and we do the best we can. Right? We also stick around because there's more of the Wells Report next. Stay right there. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Thanks very much for being a part of our broadcast today. You can do so via chat. You can do so on the telephone, 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. So, senior administration officials, and you've seen them, hitting the airwaves, arm-twisting reporters, imploring anybody who will listen the economy is still healthy. White House is scrambling behind the scenes and in public to get ahead of a potentially brutal economic punch to the face that could give Republicans the chance to declare that the Biden recession is underway. Wall Street analysts, economists, and even some in the Biden administration itself expect a report tomorrow to show the economy shrank for a second straight quarter, meaning a classic but by no means the only definition of a recession. This, by the way, is from Politico. They put this together. Ben White is the author. Senior administration officials hitting the airwaves, arm twisting, et cetera, despised, and they're trying to figure out what's going on with the economy, despised by majorities of both Republicans and Democrats, fed up with inflation. They're still trying to convince us all that the economy is still healthy. But White House officials admit that changing people's minds is a daunting task, as the highest inflation in 4 decades severely cuts into wages, even as the economy continues to churn out jobs and Americans keep spending. You have to keep something in mind here. This job situation is not permanent. That we have this downturn in the economy and we still have everybody trying to get a job. And I mean, jobs are plentiful. People to do them are not, which is why the unemployment rate is so low. That's not going to last forever. That is not going to last forever. And so, but you have to keep in mind this aircraft carrier of the entire American economy takes about 18 months to turn. It takes about 18 months to turn around. So like I said, when I say that we have inflation and we have this gross domestic product situation, it's going to be around for a while. It's just going to be around. Like I said, getting along with the Politico article, I don't think any of us are trying to convince anyone that their feelings about the economy are wrong, said Jared Bernstein, a member of the Council of Economic Advisors and one of President Biden's longest-serving aides. He said that in an interview. What we're trying to do is explain things in a much more nuanced way than most people are used to getting from the daily news flow. Now, you have to keep something else in mind. We also rail an awful lot against hyperbole and hypocrisy. This is a good reason why we do that. This is a very good reason why we do that. So the inflation, or excuse me, the recession benchmark of 2 downward turns in GDP is a creation of the mainstream media. It is a creation of the mainstream media because what they needed to do was they needed to make George W. Bush look bad. And any president that is not of their political ilk, whenever it gets close to having 2 downward turns in gross domestic product, well, my God, we're in a recession. I mean, even now, although the President Trump has been out of power for almost 2 years, coming up on 2 years, they're trying to say that the spending done during the Trump administration is responsible for what we see now. That is not the case. Like I said, it takes about 18 months. Well, that's about where we are. We're starting to see inflation hit. We're starting to see downward turns in GDP. Well, that has nothing to do with President Trump. It has nothing to do with it. But a lot of this stuff that we're dealing with Joe Biden, you have to remember that we have kind of a Democrat version of what happened with President Trump. Listen to this. President Trump was despised by both parties. Now we're in a situation where we're trying to get rid of Joe Biden. There's a New York Times article that I'm going to be talking to you about coming up in just a little bit, saying Joe Biden needs to step aside. From the New York Times. And so what President Trump had to go through, which was sabotage from the Republican Party and outright disdain from the Democrat Party, well, now it's about the same situation. The Democrats don't want Joe Biden to run again. None of them do. Voters, officials, anyone. Nobody wants him to run again. And so the normal safety net that a Democrat president would have to be able to depend on is gone. And so when we're talking about the Biden recession, remember that is a creation of the media. Now, is it true? Yeah, Joe Biden's the president. They get credit when the economy's great. They get discredit when the economy's bad. And so, yeah, okay. But is it fair? No, it's not fair when it happens to Republican presidents. It's not fair when it happens to Democrat presidents, but it's just a fact of the presidency. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to keep you from thinking that you're in a recession. Well, if you aren't driving as much and you aren't eating out as much and you aren't going to the movies as much and you're not doing anything as much as you used to, well, you're in a recession. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen showed up on NBC's Meet the Press and declared this is not an economy that's in recession. Sorry. It may not be in a recession for you, but everybody I know, we're all feeling it. Every single one of us. So keep something in mind. You know, this in time will pass, but it's going to take some time. And the only way to get out of it is to change political policy regarding fuel right this minute. And I don't see the Biden administration doing it. I don't see it happening. So we're going to have to change it for them. You're listening to The Wells Report. Back with more in a moment. Thanks very much for being with us today. So I shall returneth in just a momenteth, and thanketh you for being here. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Okay, what is the Wells Report? Good question. The Wells Report is about the news, the real news. We report the news. We analyze the news for fact. We report the facts and the news. We also point out bias. And then we give that to you. From there, we do commentary. Commentary is not news. Commentary is just my opinion, just as valuable as yours. So by all means, share it. And that's the debate part. So it's news, analysis, commentary, and debate. And so that is the basic premise of the broadcast. All right. Here's how you get in touch with us. You either go to the chat room nearest you. We got people from Twitch. We got people from YouTube. We got people from Facebook. We got people from Twitter. You're completely welcome to join us, and I hope you do. I absolutely hope you do. So we were just talking about President Biden and the misfortunes that are, in my particular view, self-inflicted. And whether they change is going to determine, how soft this economy lands or how deep whatever the recession is, as defined by whomever does it, how deep it goes. But we also have another president that is under the looking glass. Now, he's been there ever since he showed up in the American context, and that is Donald Trump. From USA Today, federal prosecutors have been questioning witnesses about the conduct of former President Donald Trump as part of an inquiry into an effort to overturn the 2020 election, which I don't believe President Trump was trying to do. I do believe that President Trump believes that what he was trying to do is make sure that a fair election took place. And I believe that maybe the idea of putting together an alternate raft of electors was a bridge too far and so on. Well, this is the attempt to take a political exercise, which was the January 6th committee, and turn it into a criminal exercise run by the DOJ. We have seen the DOJ with very peculiar ideas of law enforcement based on political party. And I can't believe that this isn't just an extension of that. Federal prosecutors have been questioning witnesses about the conduct of former President Donald Trump as part of an inquiry into the effort to overturn the 2020 election, according to USA Today. The action is part of a more aggressive review of attempts by the former president and his allies to intervene in the election by substituting what they are referred to as fake electors. The accurate term would be alternate electors, to tilt the vote in key states and to pressure former Vice President Mike Pence to block the certification of President Joe Biden's election, which he was not going to do. Mike Pence is a professional. Everything Mike Pence did was by the book. Now, we also have to look at this, and this is something that sort of dips into my opinion. What we have to also look at here is we have to look at the fact that none of this actually happened. None of it actually happened. We find ourselves in a position where the President of the United States he was not able to actually seat electors, these alternate electors. He was essentially having private conversations up to and including, they used outtakes from a statement that he made for the American people. Well, they're outtakes. The actual intent of the president at the time, President Trump, was to inform the public in an official way. Outtakes are not official. That is not an official statement. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to say, well, he said this, but he was thinking this. We don't charge people criminally for thought crime in this country, at least not so far. But if indeed they go after President Trump on these particular circumstances, because he committed no crime. He committed no crime whatsoever. What he did is that he was investigating possibilities. Now, that's what I've seen so far. And I can't use the information from the January 6th committee because there was no other side. There was no defense. There was no cross-examination. There was no evidence beyond a very partisan, very biased committee trying to make President Trump look as bad as possible. Now, were they successful? Well, that depends on you. It depends on whether you believe they were successful or not. It's sort of like this recession thing. My God, it's a Biden recession. Not necessarily. Not necessarily. But if you believe it's a Biden recession, then there it is. What we have to be very careful of here is we have to first understand that the DOJ, for whatever reason, has decided to turn itself into a political organization. Well, we don't use politics to determine how we enforce our laws in this nation. That's what separates us from most nations in the world. That's a separation I'd like to keep. Thank you very much. And so I'm very concerned about this idea that somehow the DOJ believes that it's now essential that we prosecute President Trump. We don't prosecute our former presidents. We don't do that. If there's any prosecution to be had, it is in the hands of the voters of the United States. And this idea to somehow try to disqualify President Trump, who was the clear choice of 74 million people in the 2020 election, well, that's a recipe for societal unrest, the likes of which we have not seen in a very long time. You got to go back to the 60s to find it. So that's what I'm trying to put out here today. That's what I'm trying to share with you today. That's just my opinion. It's not the news. But there is news, so let's get back to it. Like I said, this action, according to USA Today, is a more aggressive review of the attempts of the former president to intervene in the election. The sources and said prosecutors, the sources that got the information the DOJ was pursuing this have recently questioned witnesses about Trump. The person declined to describe the queries in detail, probably because whoever it is cannot. The examination of Trump's action in the run-up to the January 6th insurrection was first disclosed by the Washington Post, which cited 4 people familiar with the matter. A Justice Department spokesperson declined comment. So in other words, the Washington Post first reporting all of this and then reported again by USA Today, relying on unnamed sources. Attorney General Merrick Garland, in a Tuesday interview with NBC News, did not exempt Trump from federal scrutiny in the January 6th investigation, saying the federal prosecutors will pursue, quote, anyone who was criminally responsible, unquote. And that gets us back to criminally. Did the president commit any crimes? I've not seen one yet. I've not seen one. Is he playing hardball politically? Yeah, he was playing hardball politically. And remember, all these people that say this is a threat against democracy, they're actually saying that this is a threat against democracy, which is a completely different thing. And so Garland said, we pursue justice without fear or favor. I will ask you this question. Do you believe that? Do you believe that the current DOJ pursues justice without fear or favor? I don't know that I can say that. I'll say again that we hold accountable anybody who is criminally responsible for attempting to interfere with a legitimate lawful transfer of power from one administration to the next. Last month, federal investigators searched the home of former Assistant Attorney General Jeffrey Clark, who drafted a letter to officials in 6 states to overturn their election results. And once again, I'm sure it wasn't, please set aside your election results and give us the result we wanted. There was a loose conversation between the president and an election official in Georgia that touched on that. But once again, did anything actually happen? Was it a crime that the president said, hey, we've got to find these votes? Well, the DOJ is going to look at that. I don't think it is, but it could be. Authorities seized the cell phones of John Eastman, one of Trump's personal lawyers who developed a scheme to have then Vice President Pence single-handedly reject electors from states that Joe Biden won. There is a review of the electoral vote that is in the book of the House of Representatives and the government of the United States. Pence, in order for Pence to have some sort of place in this, would have to have done something. He did not. So once again, there is no crime. Let me give you an example this way. Say, for example, You drive into the parking lot of a bank. Okay? You drive into the parking lot of a bank, you have a note in your pocket, and you have a gun. The note says, "Give me all your money." You're sitting in the parking lot, then you change your mind, and you drive away. Have you committed a crime? The answer is no. You have not committed a crime. You thought better of it and did something else. Cooler heads prevailed. You said, "No, I'm not going to do this." Now, was President Trump trying to rob a bank? No. Was he planning on using violence? No, he wasn't doing any of these things. So, once again, in this country, you have to commit a crime before you can be prosecuted for it. Now, this is what the DOJ is going to have to deal with here. What I suspect is that this is going to account for a whole lot of nothing. All this is simply the mainstream media, which is the propaganda source for the American left and the Democrat Party. And you know that as well as I do. All this is them doing their job to try to besmirch President Donald Trump, because whether you believe it or whether anybody you know believes it, the Democrat Party believes that Donald Trump has a very good chance of being elected president for the second time. And they're doing everything they can do to stop him, because President Trump did huge damage to the leftist agenda in this nation when he was the president, and he will do so again. And this gets down to a political theory that I've been rolling around in my mind for a long time. If your political opponent does not have a leg to stand on from a standpoint of actual achievements while they were in power, the only way for them to continue staying in power is to make the other side somehow unpalatable to American voters. And so you say all kinds of nasty things about them. Well, that stuff needs to be true. Now, that's in the mind of the voter. But in the mind of a courtroom, that has to be absolutely true. And if indeed the DOJ sees fit to attempt to indict a former president, it is nothing more than political, especially if no crimes have been committed. They are going to have to prove a crime. Will they? Will they? We'll see. We will see. This week, President's former chief of staff, Mark Short. Let me switch the camera. Oh, yeah, let me switch the camera over here and do that. Okay. This week, Pence's former chief of staff, Mark Short, acknowledged that he had testified before a federal grand jury last week. Short told CNN that he received a grand jury subpoena and complied with it. In a report yesterday, the Post also disclosed that the federal authorities in April had obtained the phone records of Trump administrative aides, including former chief of staff Mark Meadows. And regardless of whether or not you believe that President Trump and some of those aides have executive privilege, you have to remember that the President of the United States has executive privilege. He does. He's also got a situation where there is attorney-client privacy. And so, once again, when you get it to the DOJ stage, you got to go through all of that. And I don't think Merrick Garland has a leg to stand on. More about this in a moment. You're listening to The Wells Report. You're listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. This is CNN's version of the story regarding the DOJ and their looking into the conduct of President Donald Trump on or about January 6th. The move by the Justice Department to bring two top aides to former Vice President Mike Pence in front of a federal grand jury is the most aggressive public step taken yet by prosecutors investigating the plots to subvert the 2020 election. It signals that the department's probe has reached inside former President Donald Trump's White House and that investigators are looking at conduct directly related to President Trump and his closest allies in an effort to overturn his election defeat. There's another term for political allies, by the way. That is political advisors. So what we're trying to engineer here, if I read this right, is we're trying to completely do away with presidential executive privilege. We are going to make it impossible for a president to seek advice without those advisors being called before a grand jury. So the next president of the United States is going to do what? He's not going to have any conversations that expose him to that level of danger, because I guarantee you, if you're in a situation where someone is trying to, hi, this is the Wells Report, hang on a second. If you're in a situation where a president is trying to make policy, what you're going to do is you're going to find out that he's going to either have to do it all by himself or he's going to do it in a closed room where no one can say anything about anything. Well, hello, welcome to the Wells Report.
JD, this is Tate from Burleson.
Hey, Tate, what's up?
When are you going to... let's start here. I used to listen to you when you was on Cliff and other stations.
Yes.
What happened to you? Because you used to call it straight down the line.
I do.
This Trump insurrection has really twisted your mindset.
No, it hasn't. What I'm trying to do... No, let me respond. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to keep it fair. You know, you used to say that you called me on the telephone to keep it real. Okay? And you did. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to keep this fair.
It's not your task to keep it fair.
That's what I'm doing. That's all I'm doing. That is all I'm doing here. President Trump did not get his say during the January 6th committee hearings.
Why?
Why? Because they didn't want to have anything to do with it.
Who are they?
The actual committee. Nancy Pelosi and all those guys that put that select committee together.
He pulled the people. First of all, they were going to be independent. He didn't want, after the Democrats gave him all he wanted, he pulled it. He shut it down. And
no, that's not the way. Hang on, hang on just a second. Hang on a second. Hang on a second. Isaac.
He refused to do it. He pulled everyone.
Isaac.
Isaac,
Okay, you say one thing and then I say one thing. Okay?
Go ahead.
All right. So Mike McCarthy wanted to put Jim Jordan on that panel. And the panel said no. And that's when Mike McCarthy pulled everybody else. Okay?
McCarthy, go ahead.
What did I say? Mike McCarthy. Yeah. Yeah. Kevin McCarthy. Thank you. Kevin McCarthy. That's when Kevin McCarthy pulled everybody else. Now, was that something that I would have done? No, I don't think so. What I would have done is I would have found somebody that was straight down the line. What I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to keep this fair. And all of this doesn't matter one bit at all. Because the true people that are going to decide this are the voters of the United States. Not anybody else. Nobody else will do that. Okay?
And you and I...
You have to stay there because I've got to take a break. Okay? So just stay where you are. Don't go anyplace, and thanks for calling. You see, you can call on the telephone. 817-379-2172. See, you can be on the phone. And see, I'm being nice. I'm not stomping on anybody. Even though Isaac is very, very difficult for me to deal with because he keeps stomping me in the face. But that's just Isaac's thing. Back with more when we come back. Stay where you are. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. That's 817-379-2172. You are welcome to call. We are currently on the phone with Tate, who's calling us from, what part of town are you calling us from, Tate?
Burleson.
Burleson. Okay. So Tate's from Burleson, and he's joining us here. And Tate is a Democrat. Okay, he's a Democrat, but not a leftist. There are times, however, when he sort of slips into it, but let's hold that for another day. But he's a Democrat, and he can see the realities of where we are. Now, is he a Trump fan? No, absolutely not. And when I argue on behalf of President Trump, it is not because I am some acolyte to President Trump. The reason I do that is because somebody's got to be fair. And that's what I'm talking about here. Now what we were talking about the president being under the magnifying glass of the DOJ. There's a big difference between the political ramifications of what President Trump did and the criminal ramifications of what President Trump did. And Tate, tell me what you think about this. If the president had actually committed a crime, we wouldn't be having this conversation, because he would have already been accused of conspiracy or whatever it is that they would have figured out. If he'd actually committed a crime, that would already be done. But he hasn't actually committed a crime. What he has done is he has offended the Democrat body politic, the leftist body politic, and they fear him because they think those 74 million people that showed up to vote for him in 2020, they're going to show up again. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to find some way of disqualifying President Trump. That's where the word insurrection came from. It wasn't an insurrection. There was no insurrection there. Nobody had weapons. There was not an armed force to take the Capitol. It was a bunch of people with signs and flags. And the only person that actually got killed because of that, now I'm setting aside the police that got beat up. That was just inexcusable. Okay? And the people that beat up cops, need to spend time in jail thinking about it. That's the way I feel about that. But the simple case of the matter is, had President Trump actually committed a crime, this would be over. But he hasn't.
Okay, so 2 points of disagreement. To me, he did commit a crime.
What? What crime was it?
An insurrection.
What was it?
Election fraud. That's
No. Hang on a second. No, okay. Well, election fraud is kind of hard to prove because he wasn't involved with any elections anywhere in the country.
When you call a state representative, multiple state representatives, and you tell them, find me X amount of votes, that's election fraud.
That's not election fraud. That's not election fraud. That is a conversation between two politicians. It was the Republican Secretary of State of the state of Georgia, I believe, and President Trump. And that was a conversation. That's not a crime.
And when he went through every question he had, every accusation that he had about the election in Georgia, and the Rappaport told him, that's not correct, Mr. President. That's wrong. This is the correct data. And if you come back later on, well, I just need 11,780 votes. Find me. That's where they're going to get them.
Well, that's not a crime. That's not election fraud. That's nothing. Okay, that is a conversation between two people. Dude, now wait. Let me ask you this. So no one can call anybody about any questions about any election at any time for any reason? Is that where we're going with this?
You can.
Well,
I don't mind the 60 courts, the lawsuits. I don't mind him asking what happened here or there. But when you say find me 11,780 votes after you've been told that all your assumptions were wrong, after you've been told by your AG, Barr told them that there was no fraud, and you continue this path, and after the certification, you continue to pass, that's where they're going to get them.
For what?
Yeah, stop and accept the results and say, you know what, for the good of the country, I'm going to go ahead and say that, Biden won, but I'm coming back 4 more years. He'd be in a much stronger position right now. He'll
Well,
probably win more electoral votes than Ronald Reagan.
well, let's talk a little bit about
Now
this.
they got him.
Let's talk a little bit about this. Okay, let's talk about where he stands politically now, absent all of this stuff. He got 74 million votes last time. If he runs in 2024, do you think he's going to get more or less?
He's going to get less.
I think he's going to get more. See, that's where we disagree. And the reason is because when it all comes down to it, the people of the United States will speak. The only way for President Trump to not be on the ticket in 2024 if he decides not to run, or if he decides to run, is if the Republican Party refuses to put him on their ballot. If they do that, that's the end of the Republican Party.
You know they won't do that, JD.
I know. So, but just think about it for a minute. Just think about this for a minute. Look at the politics of it. The Republican Party can't turn away Donald Trump. They'll never win another election as long as there's a Republican Party. It will destroy the party. And I believe, and we talked about this during the break, I believe that if the Democrats continue pushing this, they're going to badly damage their party to the tune of not being in power for probably a couple of decades if they don't quit screwing around with this. You know, you make it.
Talk about the
No.
Democrat
Let me say.
we don't pursue this criminal case, then you have Democrats who will be leaving the party. This is a must.
Well, no. I think you'll.
Insurrection at the Capitol. His attempt to get Mike Pence to stop certification. His attempt to allow them to
stop.
go in.
Okay, stop for a minute. Stop for a moment. Stop for a moment.
Again,
stop.
Stop for a moment.
Sure. What did he do to stop Mike Pence?
He tried to convince Mike Pence that he had the authority to stop certification, to send those votes back to those 5 states, and then therefore allowing alternative electors to take their place. And
did any of that actually happen?
It was an attempt. Yes, if you had
but now hang on a second. No, hold on a second here. Now hold on a second.
Right.
Okay. Once again, we don't prosecute people for attempts to anything except attempted murder, and attempted murder is an add-on to an already present assault charge or assault with a deadly weapon charge. Okay, so we don't prosecute people for conversations on the phone. I guarantee you that if there was a conversation with Mike Pence and Donald Trump, it went something like this. Hey, Mike, you got to do something about these. Electoral college votes. We think those elections were crooked. Mike Pence went, Mr. President, I'm going to follow through with this ceremony as prescribed, just as Gore did when it was during the Bush election, and that's what I'm going to do. And that would be the end of the conversation, because Mike Pence is too much of a political pro to get ensnared in something so what would be obviously unsuccessful. But is it in?
But it's not the end of the conversation, because it took place on January 6th. We asked him again. He declined, and then that's where Trump went.
Well, he declined. That he does not have. He did. Look, President Trump could have called out the National Guard, actually gone to the Capitol with the National Guard, those that would follow his order. Nobody would. I happen to know those guys pretty well. I served with them for 8 months. Nobody's going to do it. But let's assume, just for the sake of argument, that President Trump called out the D.C. Brigade of the National Guard, surrounded the Capitol building, absolutely arrested everybody inside it, stopped everything, and then took power. That would be an insurrection. But that's not what happened. What happened is that there were private conversations between the president and a whole bunch of people that had been spilled out on the floor right in front of the American people in an attempt to destroy President Donald Trump. That's all this is.
We don't agree on this, because when the criminal case coming, I've been right about the minion. I've been right about the whole issue of January 6th.
No.
Like me.
Okay, now, well, let's not try to take this. Let's hold on.
Again, hold on.
Hold on.
Again,
You're going to confuse
And watch the
everyone.
show. It's going to happen. He's going to be arrested. He's going to be charged, and he will have to show up and defend what his action.
Okay. Now, what happens before he has to get arrested? Before he could be arrested, what has to happen?
Yeah, they have to go to a grand jury.
Right. Do you honestly believe that a grand jury of the United States is going to indict a former president?
Yes, based on the evidence, yes.
Okay. What does that mean? What does that mean for the future?
It means that we do not tolerate insurrection in this country.
What it also means in the future is that any president who runs for the office is subject to the political whims of the opposing party and can be charged for whatever they can come up with at any given moment.
This is not a whatever you can come up with.
There's also
This is
something else.
actual
No,
hate
once again, you've got to cite.
and
You've
fine
got
me.
to cite the
We don't agree,
crimes.
and that's fine.
You have to
I'm telling
cite
you,
the crimes.
As a Democrat, as someone who's been right on this numerous times, the next step will be the grand jury and Trump being indicted.
Okay, so let me ask you a couple of questions. Thing number one: what's going to happen? What's going to happen to if we indict this president, this former president? If we indict this former president, what's going to happen to the next president, the next former president?
You're gonna have to watch his P's and Q's.
No, what he's going to do. What he's going to do is he's going to everything's going to be underground. All of these conversations are going to be held in a black room where nobody can talk, and no one will ever hear anything that's being said. That's what the Soviet Union did, and they went belly up. Let me give you another.
JD,
let me ask you another question.
Product, they had an app called Signal where the most pertinent conversation took place on. So we don't even know what Trump and his allies were talking about, because they used the app called Signal. That's been already discovered.
Well, the only thing that I want to ask you is this. Well, you're going to see more of that after this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to see more of that. Is that what we want? No. Let me bring you some. Let me bring something else up. They've established a whole bunch of precedents here. Okay. Do you honestly believe? And I have to be careful with this because the Republican Party is gutless. But if the Republican Party had the stones that the Democrat Party has, do you really want to see all the outtakes of conversations with President Biden spilled out on the floor in front of the American people? Do you really want to hear the gibberish conversations that this man has had between he and his advisors? You want to see those transcripts?
I do not.
No. And you know what? We shouldn't have seen these. Presidents have to have.
To the insurrection, yes, because he had a difficult time. He gave a speech yesterday talking about law and order and how he loved law enforcement.
True.
And you have a difficult time calling out those who attacked the Capitol, not those who attended the rally, not those who stayed outside of the Capitol, but those who were actually inside the Capitol. You had a difficulty calling them criminals.
Let me ask you another question. Let me ask you another question. What would have happened if the Secret Service had actually taken the president to the Capitol? Do you think any of that stuff would have happened?
Would have had unrefutable proof that he was leading the insurrection.
No. If President Trump had actually gone to the Capitol, everyone would have gathered around him. He would have stopped everything. But they wouldn't take him there, would they?
Then what he would have said, you must show strength, you can't show weakness.
And he said peacefully.
That's a 10-second statement.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. He said it. He said it. And oh, by the way, when you start talking about how you peacefully protest and so on and so forth, and an assassin shows up before the Associate Justice Brett Kavanaugh's house and tries to kill him. Okay.
What about
all of that goes out the window when you start saying, okay, the president said, go out there and peacefully protest. Well, that's what everybody said. That's what everybody said right up until the assassin showed up at Brett Kavanaugh's house. No. Once again, this is where the hyperbole. Listen.
We don't.
Listen.
Here, people.
Listen.
Look at those words that we use, and you're trying to,
No, I'm trying to bring up. No, I'm doing what I said. Listen. Listen. What I'm listen.
On the table.
Listen.
For the third time, he will be indicted.
Tate, stop. What I'm trying to do is what I said I was going to do at the beginning of this. I'm trying to keep it fair. You don't get to say, go out there and peacefully protest right up until the assassin shows up at an associate justice's house. and then say that that doesn't mean anything when the president of the United States at the time, President Trump, said go peacefully protest at the Capitol. You cannot change the definition from one to another. And if you do, you're playing politics, and that makes us a third world nation.
Did you not say that Maxine Waters bears some responsibility when people show up and do things, as she said, get in their face? That was your premise, correct?
Yeah, but she didn't say peacefully protest. She said get in their face, make them uncomfortable.
Okay, well, politician words have meaning.
Well, okay, but yeah, they do. Listen, man, I got to go. But as always, I've always appreciated your participation in this broadcast. I always have.
All right, be blessed.
Be blessed, you too. Take good care of yourself, and thanks very much for joining us. I'm going to hang up. I don't have a hold button. You're listening to the Wells Report. Back with more in a moment. You are listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number 817-379-2172. Operator is standing by. See, it works. See, I was nice. Just because you disagree with me doesn't mean that we can't talk. As a matter of fact, that's what this broadcast is all about. Us having conversations that we just had. After, of course, I report the news and analyze the news for fact. Make commentary. That's the debate part. And that's the conversation that I think is a requirement of where this country is and what it needs at this particular moment. So do not hesitate to call. Don't hesitate to call. Please do. So let me explain a little bit what I'm talking about here. Okay. So the DOJ can investigate anything they want to, but remember, they have to do something that the January 6th committee, which was essentially a trial in public against President Donald Trump, the DOJ, regardless of their politics, and we can all agree that the DOJ is a political organization now, very much like the CDC, very much like the FBI, very much like CIA. It's a political organization now. It used to be an agency of the United States government. Well, now it's just another political group. All right. But what has to happen, according to the laws of the land, is there has to be due process. There has to be an opportunity for someone to defend themselves, to face their accusers, cross-examination, adversarial conversation. Now, what I will argue is this. If the January 6th committee actually accomplished anything, they have laid out the prosecution's case. Okay? And that's all right. But that is not the whole story. The Republican Party hasn't laid out the story for President Donald Trump. Neither is Donald Trump. They're waiting. It's too soon. Arguably, it's too soon for the select committee to have this conversation as well. But let's assume that that's the prosecution. And let's assume, and all I'm trying to do, by the way, is to keep things fair. That's all I'm trying to do. And somebody has to stand up for President Trump and his ideologies and what he believes and so on and so forth, at least as an observer, and say what I think. Okay, I'll take that job. But that doesn't mean that I'm biased against the January 6th committee. I disagree with it because they didn't present both sides. This would be a done deal if they had presented both sides. But the Democrat Party has got to render Donald Trump irrelevant for the 2024 election, or they're going to lose. And they know it. They absolutely know it. And that's what this is all about. The DOJ, on the other hand, to try to prove a criminal case, they have a different kettle of fish. And as I told Tate just a moment ago, if Donald Trump had actually committed a crime, we wouldn't be having this conversation. We'd be talking about what happened in the trial today. Not even Merrick Garland can twist things around so much that a grand jury is going to return an indictment against a former president of the United States. The precedent would be awful. The precedent would be awful. I mean, look at the corollary. Hillary Clinton, the wife of a former president, broke the Espionage Act, Article 7, 16 times. She wasn't indicted. In fact, the FBI all but destroyed its credibility as a law enforcement agency in explaining why they didn't charge her. They just said, well, she was just too stupid. She didn't know what she was doing. Baloney. That was James Comey. The fix was in, done. But here we are with the idea somehow that we're going to indict a guy who hasn't committed a crime for a crime that we're making up. If Donald Trump is guilty of anything, he's guilty of offending the leftist part of the Democrat Party. That's it. And was it because of the so-called insurrection, which was not an insurrection? Because if you can call what happened during the summer of 2020 the BLM protests as just peaceful protests, then I most certainly can. I most certainly can say that what happened on January 6th was a peaceful protest, especially considering there was less violence, fewer injuries, less property damage, fewer Wendy's burning down, fewer fewer instances of looting at Target stores, fewer federal buildings being burned, fewer police officers being wounded, fewer attempts to kill an entire police department simply by locking them in a police station and then setting it on fire. These are all matters of record. Are there political prisoners because of it? Yes. Is it improper? Absolutely. Has that check been written? Yeah, it's about to get cashed. It's about to be bad. But that's another story for another day. You are listening to the Wells Report. Thanks very much for being here. We'll be back with more coming up in just a couple of moments as we roll on for Wednesday afternoon, the 27th of July. See? You can be on the air on the phone with me. I'm very happy about that. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. We bring you news, analysis, commentary, and debate. News, we give you the real news. We analyze it for fact. We point out bias. We bring you commentary, which is my opinion. It's not news. There are a lot of people who do this job and want you to believe that their opinion is news. They are incorrect. Simply incorrect. What I do is I provide my opinion, just as valuable as yours, and that brings us to debate. Had a great debate just a couple of seconds ago. Tate called from Burleson, Texas. And you can too. 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. And so what we have is we have an opportunity to hear the news, analyze the news, discuss the news. And that's what this is. You can call anytime you want, 817-379-2172. You can join us on the chat. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Twitter and Twitch. We got a lot of people doing all of that, and you can be the next one. The Wells Report was cruising along on a radio station here in Dallas and around the country and the world on the USA Radio Network. I left the network. Actually, it wasn't that I left the network. It was sort of it was a weird confluence of things. I simply had to go serve on that border as a Texas State Guardsman. By the way, anything that I say about the border has nothing to do with the Texas Military Department, has nothing to do with the Texas State Guard, has nothing to do with any of that. Yes, I'm a Texas State Guardsman. Yes, I am a service member in the Texas Military Department. But that does not mean that anything I say has anything to do with them or their policies or what they do. I am a soldier of Texas. I follow my orders. But I volunteered for that mission, and I spent 8 months down there. And what I saw down there was, I didn't think that it could be worse, but it was worse than the original time I went down there in 2014. So I've been on the border for nearly a year, watching what happens down there. We are at the border at this particular moment because the federal government will not regulate that border. The Constitution says they must, and they do not. And we here in Texas, when things are egregiously wrong, we take care of it ourselves, and that's what we're doing. My voice changes when I discuss what's going down there because the corruption and crime and depravity is just not something you can bluster about. There are more pieces of information coming out of this mission than the last I was on. And that's a good thing. The actual monstrosity that is that border down there and the cartel activity down there is at least being talked about here. There's a plethora of information that you don't know, but at least some of it's coming out now. U.S. Customs and Border Patrol agents found a massive load of drugs. It happened over the weekend at the Arizona-Mexico border. They confiscated several types of drugs hidden inside a gas tank of a vehicle and other parts of the vehicle. The stash was seized at the Nogales border checkpoint when agents found 2.5 pounds of black tar heroin, 9 pounds of heroin, 89 pounds of methamphetamine, and 320,000 fentanyl pills. Those pills are, for all intents and purposes, a chemical attack against the United States of America. The fentanyl is made in China. It is shipped to Mexico. It is processed into the form that can be transported, usually in the form of counterfeit pills, and they kill people. They kill people. 320,000 fentanyl pills, 2 milligrams of any pill, and these are much bigger than 2 milligrams, will kill you. You take one of those pills, you can grind it up, You can treat a dollar bill with it. Someone picks up the dollar bill, goes right through your skin. And this has happened to police officers and citizens and so on. And unless somebody's right there with something called, I believe it's Narcan, you die. We had a rule down there. You know, we would pick up trash inside the confines of the particular bases we were in, but outside the confines of the particular base we were in, no. And you're walking outside the actual boundary, and you can find $100 bill lying there. Don't touch it. Don't touch it. And that's just one of the pitfalls. Human trafficking, human smuggling. The drugs we just talked about. It is the highway into the United States of America, and it's wide open. And there are finally people that are beginning to speak against the policies that make this happen. Multiple Border Patrol agents are pushing back against Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas' claim the southern border is secure. In no way, shape, or form is that border secure. It isn't. This is the same organization that will tell you that the border is secure, but will also, by law, have to report that 500,000 gotaways were able to evade the border activities, not just in Texas. It doesn't happen much in Texas, but it happens. But all along the border, New Mexico, Arizona, California, Texas. 500,000 people are just gotaways. They just managed to evade everybody. 250,000 people are interdicted at our border every month in Texas alone. And that is the border that Alejandro Mayorkas, the Homeland Security Secretary, claims is secure. Agents on the front lines of historic migrant crises are struggling to cope with the overwhelming numbers facing them. There were more than 207,000 migrant encounters in June alone, the fourth month in a row where the number encountered breached the 200,000 mark. Mayorkas, speaking at the Aspen Security Forum, dismissed claims about the border not being secure. Look, the border is secure. We are working to make the border more secure. It is either secure or not. If you have to make the border more secure, it's because the border isn't secure. This is political mumbo jumbo. This is gobbledygookian butt covering on the part of a Washington bureaucrat that believes that border ought to be open. He then faulted lawmakers who said they will not commit to broad immigration legislation until the situation is addressed, which is a nice dodge. Oh, well, it's not my fault. It's the legislature. No, you have laws on the books. You have laws on the books that you can enforce beginning tomorrow. Are you? The answer is no. The border is not secure. Done. I have said to a number of legislators who expressed to me that we need to address the challenge at the border before they pass legislation. I take issue with the math of holding the solution hostage until the problem is resolved. There is work to be done, he said, adding that safe and secure are two different words. There are smugglers that operate on the Mexican side of the border, what we call the Mike side, and placing one's life in their hands is not safe. Well, how do you stop them? You don't stop them by leaving the border open. You don't stop them by inviting them to come to the country, both of which has happened. You stop them by closing the border. And you force them into doing a prescribed route. If you believe that you are leaving your country because you are in extreme personal danger and you are asking for asylum in the United States of America, fine. But that's in the country you started in, Central America, what have you. Arguably, if you're in Mexico, about to cross the border, you've already found asylum. And so Title 42, which is kind of a tenuous way of getting it done, but it worked, to keep people on the south side of the border until their cases are heard, because obviously bringing them into the United States and then releasing them on their own recognizance does not work. That was the solution, and it did work. You close the border, you finish the border fence, you do the things that are necessary to force compliance with American law. And that is not what Secretary Mayorkas is doing. When there is a clear direction from the Constitution of the United States that the federal government do exactly that. That, in a nutshell, is the entire story. But that's not what we're doing. One agent of the Border Patrol said hundreds of thousands cross every month is not the definition of secure. They are liars, and anyone who believes them are fools. Brandon Judd, the president of the National Border Patrol Council, also disputed that the border is secure, pointing to not only the drugs that flow into the U.S., but the number of migrants that get past agents. A high-level CBP source, Customs and Border Protection, told Fox News last month there have been 440,000 known gotaways since the fiscal year began in October, over 50,000 in May. Combined with the 400,000 known gotaways since the beginning of fiscal year 2021, that means that more than 800,000 illegal immigrants have gotten past agents since October of 2020. That does not count the numbers that have been taken into the country, given a place to stay, given medical checks, given vaccinations, given food, given shelter, and then loaded onto buses and sent to all manner of cities in the United States without those cities' permission in the dead of night to start their new lives in the United States, and they are still illegal aliens. Judd continued, he said, Secretary Mayorkas knows the cartels use illegal border crossers to facilitate their higher value contraband, including criminal aliens and fentanyl. Secretary Mayorkas knows that we have the least secure border in our history, as evidenced by nearly 1 million known gotaways and over 100,000 overdose deaths from narcotics coming across our southwest border. Something I maintain is a chemical attack against the United States by the People's Republic of China. Nobody's saying it except me, but that's what it is. They already got us with a biological attack, and now we have a chemical attack. Another Border Patrol source told Fox News that Mayorkas is telling bold-faced lies. They're using issues like poverty, crime, and climate change as reasons for asylum, but those do not meet the legal standard of the law. So we just set aside laws to satisfy the political imperative, which is not to bring people to the United States to do work that Americans won't do. These people are being brought to the United States to cast votes Americans won't cast. That isn't cynicism. That is the news. So we've talked about the drugs. We've talked about the human smuggling. And by the way, the Biden administration, in that act of moving people across the border and then into these cities, the biggest human smuggler in the United States is the Biden administration, because these people are still not legal. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. We're finally talking about the border. Finally, people are seeing some of the realities that everybody that works for the Texas Military Department still on that border face every single day. I was one of them. But once again, please understand, nothing I say has anything to do with the Texas Military Department or the Texas State Guard. These are my words only. I'm solely responsible for what I say. So we talked about the drugs. We talked about the human smuggling, the human trafficking. And now we've gotten to the name-calling stage. The Border Patrol, members of the Border Patrol and the Border Patrol Council, flat calling the President of the United States and the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security liars. The name-calling doesn't stop there. An Idaho sheriff said his county is experiencing a crisis level of drug overdoses. He is Canyon County, Idaho Sheriff Kieran Donahue, joined Fox News and said this. We are at a crisis stage, quite frankly. We've never seen the number of seizures and the amounts of any drug, including methamphetamine, like we're seeing in fentanyl. And of course, we're still dealing with a methamphetamine crisis that's been going on for years. Donahue said that he has had numerous hospitalizations of deputies just from being in contact with fentanyl. The sheriff said these cartels are well established, exist in all communities throughout the United States. There is not a day or night that goes by that we're not dealing with someone associated with the Mexican cartels, at least in our community and the communities throughout the state of Idaho. Does that sound like a border state? Yeah, it is a border state, but with Canada. The sheriff says we are at war with the cartels. He described how cartels tried to kidnap his then 16-year-old daughter during his time on an FBI gang task force. He said the plot was interrupted before it could be carried out. They tried to kidnap my daughter years ago. She was 16. Thankfully, that case got unraveled before it actually happened. These people play for keeps. On my way back from my first deployment on the border in 2014, I got a call from the FBI who told me there was a legitimate death threat against me and my family. These people play for keeps. Then Donahue concluded by calling DHS Secretary Mayorkas idiotic for claiming the southern border is secure. Quote, this is absolutely ridiculous to think this border is secure, that we're safe in our communities. We are not. We are on the cusp of complete collapse. You know, those cartels just about rule Mexico. The very quickest way to die in Mexico is to be an elected official, sheriff, mayor, what have you, and say the words, we're going to war with the cartels. Those people are assassinated forthwith. This Idaho sheriff, and he's in Idaho now, he's talking about Mexican cartels. He says they're in every community in the United States. Mexico, I don't know how they're going to get these cartels under control. I don't have any idea how they're going to do it. Do we want that same problem in these United States? I would say the answer is no. But that's what we are being set up for by the current policies of the current administration. The Department of Homeland Security is turning into a clear and present danger against the people of the United States because of these policies. Because the guy running the show thinks the border's secure. And now he's being called names. But what of the depravity? What of the depravity? We'll talk about that next. You're listening to The Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. You are listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. You can join the debates. All you have to do is go to the chat room you can find on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch. We were just talking about how an Idaho sheriff believes that cartel activity, Mexican drug cartel activity, exists in every community in the United States. I can't say he's incorrect. Yvonne said, I thought I heard that one of the main reasons for the fall of Rome was that they gave up restricting who could come into their country. I actually don't know whether that's true or not. But there was a time when being a citizen of Rome meant that you could go anywhere in the Roman Empire, and should anybody create harm to you, the entire weight of Rome would visit themselves on whoever was responsible. And perhaps they stopped taking that citizenship seriously, very much like the citizenship of the United States, valueless. The only thing that American citizenship is good for at this particular moment is making it convenient for law enforcement to come and arrest you if you do something that is against the law, or apparently against the politics of the ruling party. I'm sure that happened in Rome as well. But if indeed they allowed the infiltration of those outside of Rome into the Roman Empire, finally got to the point where they couldn't do anything about those people within their own confines, and then conquerors from outside came, and they were powerless to stop them. Is that the way republics fall? It's one of the ways. The other way republics fall is when people start stealing from the treasury. We're $28.8 trillion in debt. Benjamin Franklin said, well, we've given you a republic for as long as you can keep it. Is that where we find ourselves today? We've been talking about the border. And now it's time to talk about the human trafficking aspect of it. Ted Cruz, one of the senators of the state of Texas, went to the border and filed this report.
These children come in debt to vicious cartels, thousands and thousands of dollars. And the teenage boys work for the gangs in every city in America. And the teenage girls experience a hell worse than that, with far too many of them human trafficked into sex slavery. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are responsible for the worst plague of slavery in America since the Civil War. This is not compassionate. This is not humane. This is barbaric.
They showed pictures of what are called rape trees. The panties of the victims left hanging on the branches. Monuments to depravity, monuments to savagery. Invitations to try to outdo the rape tree you just saw with one of your own, I guess, if you're a cartel member. It's not just girls. It's everyone. Yes, females endure that more. But men and boys suffer the same fate. Yes, they're monuments to savagery and depravity. But they're also monuments to people's lives who have been irrevocably changed based on that depravity and that savagery. People die on their way across the border. They rot until someone finds them, if the coyotes don't find them first. There are people in this country that are trying to scratch out a living in homeless shelters, that started their travel to the United States and hopefully a better life at the invitation of the Biden administration and other administrations. Let's be fair. This has been a mess for decades. Ronald Reagan himself declared amnesty for a bunch of people that crashed the gate. So this just gives you a small story, a small snippet of what's actually going on down there. Unfettered drug trafficking. Oh, yeah. 320,000 fentanyl pills. That's a pretty sizable grab. That's a pretty sizable seizure. But nothing in comparison to the 1.5 million fentanyl tablets that will find their way into the United States between now and the end of the year. The heroin, the cocaine, the methamphetamine, the terrorists, terrorist watch list personnel arrested on a regular basis down there. What work do they have to do in these United States? Whatever they choose. It's a wide open gate. Well, maybe not wide open, but open enough. 800,000 gotaways? A 250,000 people actually stopped? But once again, a drop in the bucket? Seriously? The Constitution is clear. The federal government is responsible for the borders of these United States, and they refuse to take that responsibility. People living in squalor and poverty and all manner of pestilence see the shining city on the hill and say, yeah, I'm going to go there instead. And what do they find? The predators at the border. And not all of them make it. And many more make it, but are changed forever. Their underwear, a grim reminder of how their life was before and then after. I knew about those trees years ago. I was disheartened to find out that they still exist. And that's what happens when you show people this shining city on a hill and then have no mechanism, that is no acceptable mechanism for them to join us, to bring something to this country, aside from their poverty and their lack of skill. If we had some sort of system like that, then the countries that they're trying to leave would have to be better. They would be better. If you had to prove beyond any kind of a shadow of a doubt that you lived a law-abiding life in your originating country, there would be fewer customers for the cartels doing business in those countries. If in order to get to the shining city on the hill, you had to bring a skill, a piece of education, an ability to contribute instead of take away, those people would educate themselves down there. They'd educate themselves. They would prepare themselves for life in America as soon as they could get there. We have consulates in all those countries. If there was a way for them to apply for honest citizenship, chances are many of the people that are starving to death and raped to death, tortured to death, sucked into criminal gangs to pay off a debt that they didn't realize they were going to incur, as Ted Cruz just said. then maybe they would have a better way of getting to this nation to actually contribute. We used to have a system like that. But once again, that was before the government of the United States realized it could ignore its own law for the sake of the political agenda. And they do. Ignoring the laws of the land for the sake of politics? That's another way to lose a republic. To stop being a nation of laws and become a nation of politics? What has politics done? What has politics accomplished that is so good that they should have more power and not less? I make it plain on this broadcast. Politics has poisoned everything it's touched. Everything. From the greatest law enforcement agency in the history of the human endeavor, the FBI, to the greatest international intelligence agency in the history of the human endeavor, the CIA. The barely bridled attack dog of the IRS. All of these agencies have become politics. The agency that is absolutely impaneled and empowered to handle nothing more than nationwide health issues, public health issues, the CDC, is now a political action organization. And nothing more. And nothing more. The mainstream media, called to keep the government honest as a free press, also poisoned by politics. All the way to the roots. I do this show because I grew up in a journalistic household. My dad was an English major. He worked for the space program. My mother was a journalist. My grandfather did the work that I'm doing before I started doing it, with a little hometown newspaper called the Steel Head, Walport, Oregon. He took down a political machine, but it cost him his life. All those years with a linotype machine, which is a very interesting machine. It's got a keyboard, and what it does is it sets up these molds for lead. He exposed himself to lead all of his life. Lived on cigarettes. Died of emphysema. But he won. He's written up in the history of the Western civilization. And here I am, following in his footsteps. For the exact same reason. Maybe nobody ever hears this. Maybe nobody ever sees this. Maybe nobody ever believes this. In a lot of ways, people ask, or they say, gosh, would you do your job for nothing? Well, for the last 3 years, I have. With a small break where I went and served the state of Texas. I'm not saying this to aggrandize myself. I'm not saying this as a claim to nobility. I'm saying this because somebody's got to do this work. Somebody's got to sit there with the news of the day, report it fairly, comment on it benevolently, and debate all the fruits of those labors for the sake of this nation. Somebody has to do it. And as far as I can, as long as I can, I will. How long is that going to be? I don't know. Sooner or later, I got to start making a living. But until then, I'll do this work. And I have to believe that there would be others who do it too. I haven't found any, but I'm sure they're out there. Anyway, that's why you're here. That's why I ask you to share this broadcast with your friends. That's why I will tell you the stuff you don't want to hear, like a rape tree, and what it actually means to this nation, far beyond the depravity itself. This is the Wells Report. You're listening to the Wells Report. Thanks very much for being here today. Our telephone number 817-379-2172. So it's getting to the point where you can't even break the rules at Walmart anymore. Yeah. Aaron Gregory is 39 years old. He had to go to Walmart and was having trouble getting around, so he got one of those little carts. While he was there, he was driving erratically, haphazardly, driving the Walmart scooter down the aisles, running into shelves and displays, creating a danger for other patrons by almost striking them with the scooter. Store security cameras recorded Gregory swerving, running into items, nodding off while driving around in the motorized scooter. Like I said, he was having trouble getting around. They finally figured out what it was. He was so intoxicated that he could barely stand when he was busted at 10 a.m. Sunday morning in Melbourne, Florida. That's a city 65 miles south of Orlando. Officers were summoned to the store, reference to an intoxicated male on a motorized scooter. Yeah. They opened his backpack. It was in the basket of the scooter. There was an open bottle of Smirnoff vodka. I guarantee you it wasn't full. He's been charged with 4 misdemeanors, including driving under the influence, because you see, in Florida criminal statutes, the scooter, which tops out at 10 miles an hour, is considered a motor vehicle. Yeah, by the way, it's electric. Okay? So maybe you can get off because it's a Green New Deal thing, maybe, since we're a nation of politics, not laws. Anyway, he was treated with 4 misdemeanors, including driving under the influence, disorderly intoxication, possession of an open container of alcohol. He was, last we heard, he was being held in the Brevard County Jail in lieu of $3,000 bond. It's hard to come up with $300 when you need it. Yeah. I know exactly how he feels. I would never do that. It's not the right thing to do. But I'm just trying to tell you that Aaron Gregory hopefully will sober up, find $300, get out of jail, and maybe reconsider his ideologies regarding his own personal entertainment. I mean, I suppose he was having a good time right up to the point where he nodded off and then ran into something or someone. By the way, those scooters are kind of heavy. They're really heavy. If they hit you, they're going to hurt you. Yeah. So just in case you haven't heard, please do us all a favor. All of us who do shop in Walmart. 1, don't show up so looped that you have to use a scooter to get around. 2, if you are so snot-faced that you can barely move and you are on a scooter, try not to nod off. And 3, and this is the most important one, before you walk into a Walmart anywhere in the United States to do any shopping of any kind, please pull up your pants so we can't see your butt crack. Please. Oh. And if, say, for example, someone gave you a set of leggings, which are fancy names for tights, if someone gave those to you, don't wear them. Don't wear them. Don't wear them unless you purchase them yourself, because that is the only chance any of us have to go into Walmart and seeing someone in leggings who has no business wearing them whatsoever. Okay? I suppose there's one other thing that I can tell you. For God's sakes, don't drink Smirnoff. Oh, it is the worst vodka in the world. Belvedere is good. Belvedere's good. Stolichnia. And for those people, it's Stoli or Stolichnaya, which is not the way you say it. Stolichnia. Anyway, that's the vodka of all work. Stay away from the 100 proof because it'll get you. So Belvedere or Stolichnia. By the way, there are some Polish vodkas which are excellent. I just can't think of one right at this particular moment. I can't think of the name of one. But just as a public service, if you're going into Walmart, and I suppose maybe I'm asking too much, okay? Because sometimes when you go to Walmart, you really, I mean, there's a chance that you've been drinking if you're going into Walmart in the first place. But But we can change, if we can just change the attitude just a little bit. If we can start with pulling up your pants so we can't see your butt crack, right? Then good. That's a great start. Okay? We'll work on the drunkenness, running the scooters into displays and other people at some other time. But first, and by the way, do not give any money to Aaron Gregory. It's only $300, I know, but don't give him any money. All right? Thanks for watching the show today. I'll see you again tomorrow for another edition of the Wells Report. Until then, God bless.